Not many action games from the Xbox 360 era had as much influence on the hack-and-slash genre as Ninja Gaiden, yet despite its legacy, this series has been absent from the gaming landscape for quite some time. However, that changed last week during the Xbox Developer Direct, where we not only got the announcement of Ninja Gaiden 4, but also a surprise release of Ninja Gaiden 2 Black, which is a visual remake of Ninja Gaiden 2 powered by Unreal Engine 5. And while this remake looks decent thanks to a great use of some Unreal Engine 5 features, it suffers from significant performance issues and is quite heavy on the GPU, especially during intense combat scenarios. As unlike the Sigma version of Ninja Gaiden 2, this remake retains the gore elements of the original release with dismemberment and blood turned up to 11. And the blood decals look great, featuring reflections that add to their realism, but they also take a toll on performance when blood fills up the screen. There is an option to turn it off, but that's hardly an ideal way to play a Ninja Gaiden game. Another major performance issue is that even when the game is running at higher frame rates, it doesn't feel as smooth as it should, and after some investigations, I discovered that unless the game maintains a stable target FPS of 30, 60 or 120, it exhibits noticeable judder and the camera movement feels uneven. I'm not sure if this issue will be fully visible in this video due to YouTube's 60 FPS limit, but you'll have to take my word for it. And if you're experiencing the same problem where the game doesn't feel smooth, be sure to lock your FPS to one of the target frame rates that you'll be able to reach and maintain most of the time. And thankfully, even though the game has a limited number of graphics settings, most of them offer good performance scalability that can help you reach your target FPS. But before diving into the settings and examining their impact on the visuals and performance, let's first take a look at image quality and upscaling. The game supports all major image reconstruction techniques for both upscaling and native resolution, and comparing DLSS FSR3 and XeSS at 1440p using quality mode reveals that FSR3 suffers from significant instability, particularly in shadows and finer details. On the other hand, XeSS delivers a much cleaner image closely resembling DLSS, and because this game features high-speed animations, FSR struggles even more with noticeable pixelation and artifacts on moving characters. And although XeSS appears slightly softer here, it remains much cleaner than FSR in these scenarios. At native resolution, the trend remains the same, though this time FSR appears slightly over-sharpened even with the sharpness setting turned down. And once again, XeSS looks solid and provides more stability than OFF or TAA and TSR. And we can see why if we take a look at the shadows. Here TAA and especially TSR exhibit noticeable noise and flickering in the shadows. FSR suffers from the same problem, though to a lesser extent. In terms of performance at native resolution on the 3060 Ti, TSR is the most demanding option, followed by FSR, which runs slower than XeSS. And as expected on an Nvidia GPU, DLSS or DLAA delivers the best performance, with frame rates nearly identical to TAA. When upscaling, FSR runs slightly faster than XeSS. However, if you can't use DLSS, I recommend XeSS. And if you find the image too soft, make sure to apply some sharpening using Reshade or another tool, as the in-game sharpness slider does not work with XeSS. I have also tried the new DLSS transformer model by using the latest DLSS DLL from Cyberpunk 2077 and forcing preset G through Nvidia Inspector, and the new model is noticeably more stable and sharper. However, we can see some artifacts around Ryu, which was present in the old DLSS model as well, but it's amplified slightly with this new version. But overall, this new DLSS looks a lot better during normal gameplay. And in terms of performance on the 3060 Ti, the new transformer model comes at a cost of around 8%. And if you want to try it for yourself, I'll leave all the links and instructions in the description and pinned comment down below. The game also includes both DLSS and FSR3 frame generation, but unfortunately FSR 3.1 frame gen is not available here, as using FSR frame generation requires enabling FSR3 upscaling as well. And both DLSS and FSR frame gen work as intended, smoothing out frame rates and slightly improving stability. However, in a fast-paced game like this, frame gen isn't ideal, not just because of the additional input lag, but also due to the visual artifacts it introduces. Like here, notice how with DLSS frame gen there is significant blurring and extra visual noise, and for these reasons I don't recommend using frame gen in this game. Let's move on to the quality settings, starting with ray tracing. This ray tracing option affects both reflections and global illumination. For reflections, it simply adds skeletal meshes like characters into lumen reflections, as you can see here, which in the right circumstances, such as on water surfaces, can eliminate SSR artifacts around characters and significantly improve the look. However, when it comes to global illumination, ray tracing tends to hurt the visuals more than it helps. Like here, notice how with RT, the light coming from a hole behind the character spreads further, which is a good effect. However, this leads to a visual issue with the white specular reflection appearing everywhere. Or here, where ray tracing looks noticeably worse than the best quality global illumination. In terms of performance, even with all these issues, ray tracing is quite demanding, costing 20% in a scene like this, or 24% in this scene. So even if you can afford the performance hit, I don't recommend using ray tracing, as it often results in worse visuals. Next we have anisotropic filtering, and as usual it's best to keep this setting at the highest quality, as it has a major visual impact on textures as you can see here, while having little to no performance cost, so leave it at 16x. Moving on to shadow quality, and here we can see that the light option has a massive negative impact on the visuals, as shadows appear uniformly sharp and aliased with no filtering. Going to standard improves the quality of the shadows significantly, while high quality and best quality slightly reduce shadow noise. In terms of performance, we can see around 6% cost when going from light to standard, and around 9% when going to high quality and best quality. So for this one I recommend standard. Let's move on to effects quality. I had a hard time spotting the visual impact of this setting. In some cases I noticed a performance difference when looking at certain visual effects, but visually both light and best quality looked nearly identical. The only noticeable difference I found was in weather effects, particularly the density of raindrops and the presence of lightning. As with the light option, lightning effects are completely absent. In terms of performance, that lightning does cause a slight FPS drop, which affects all options above light, with best quality taking the biggest hit. For this reason, I recommend keeping this setting at standard or high quality. Light is also a good option, but the performance gain is minimal relative to the visual impact. Global illumination, as is typical in Unreal Engine 5 games, is one of the most crucial settings. Visually, it controls the quality of lumen global illumination. The light option disables lumen GI entirely, which results in a uniformly lit and flat appearance. And in some areas such as this one, the light option can turn off all the lights and make the entire scene too dark, as the game does not offer a proper fallback for lumen GI. Going up to standard and the higher options enables lumen GI and improves its accuracy, particularly in terms of ambient shading. And as expected, the light option provides a significant performance gain, with standard and high quality costing around 22% and best quality around 36%. So for this one I recommend standard or high quality. For reflections, similar to many other UE5 games, this one relies on a combination of screen space and lumen reflections, with this setting primarily affecting the lumen side. Using light disables lumen reflections entirely, while going above that re-enables them. In terms of performance, this is another demanding setting at the highest quality, as going from light to standard costs around 7%. High quality increases that to around 10%, and the best quality pushes it to around 21%. So since the high quality option does not offer any noticeable visual improvement, I recommend using standard for the best balance between performance and visuals. However, if you really need the extra performance, use the light option instead. And lastly, we have Foliage. This one adjusts the density of some small plants and background trees, as you can see here. Performance-wise, going from light to standard costs around 4% and to high quality around 7%. However, in this scene, the difference is more pronounced, with standard costing around 10% and high quality about 13%. So for this one, I recommend standard. But like the previous setting, light is also a viable option for those who need the extra performance. So given everything we've discussed so far, these are my recommended settings for Ninja Gaiden 2 Black. Now let's compare the performance of optimized settings versus the best quality preset at 1440p using quality DLSS with ray tracing disabled on both sides. Starting with this area, visually optimized settings look nearly identical to the best quality preset while delivering a solid 30% performance boost. However, in this area, we can see a noticeable downgrade in reflections with optimized settings. But as we covered earlier, achieving the best reflection quality comes at a massive performance cost. Speaking of performance, as you'll see at the end of this run, here optimized settings provide roughly a 38% performance improvement over the best quality preset. And with that, we arrive at the end. Thank you so much for watching and for your time. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, and if not, leave a dislike. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for future videos, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.